Welcome to Anatomy of Literature. In this video, we shall discuss Ion by Plato. Plato was a philosopher of the ancient Greek. He was born in 429 BC and died in 347 BC. Plato is famous for several works including Ion, Protagoras, Phaedrus, Republic, and the Laws. Like his other works, Ion is also a conversation which consists of dialogues between Ion and Socrates. In this conversation between Ion and Socrates, Ion is introduced as a rhapsode who interprets or recites poems, especially the poetry of Homer, and Socrates as a layman, a simple layman. The dialogues begin with Socrates greeting Ion and asking him from where he is coming. Is he coming from his home in Ephesus or is he coming from somewhere else? So, in answer to that, Ion tells that he is coming from the festival of Asclepius at Epidaurus, where a contest of reciting and interpreting poetry was held, and he, that is Ion, has won the contest. After congratulating him for winning the first prize, Socrates tells Ion that he had always envied the rhapsodes like Ion, who are experts of poetry, and Ion is especially an expert of the poems of Homer. Both of them considers Homer to be the most divine of all the poets. So then Socrates tells that a rhapsode like Ion must be a good interpreter as he is interpreting the voice of Homer, the poet himself. So he has to be an interpreter of the poet's meaning for his audience in order to be a good rhapsode. Socrates asks Ion whether he is only good at Homer or he can also say a lot of things about Hesiod or Archilochus. So, in answer to that, Ion says that no, he can only speak about Homer. Although he knows a little bit about Hesiod or any other poets, he is best for interpreting the poetry of Homer. From the beginning, Socrates' target is to subvert the idea of Ion that he is the best interpreter of the poetry of Homer. So that is why he begins with a question that are there any similarities or differences between the things that they say Homer and Hesiod in their poems. So Ion says yes, there are differences, there are also similarities. Socrates says that is there any divination, is there anything to say about divine thing in the poetry of Hesiod or Homer? Now Ion falls in the trap of Socrates' argument when he says that who is a better interpreter of divine things, Ion or a prophet? So in answer to that, Ion says that obviously a prophet is a better interpreter of the things which are divine. Socrates then goes on to say that both the poet Hesiod and Homer tells about the same things like war, like human life, like gods, all the same things, but they are different in kind and degree in their representation. So he asks who is better, either Homer or Hesiod. So uh, Ion says obviously Homer is better and Hesiod is much worse than Homer. Socrates makes this argument that who will understand better of the particular things that the poets are describing in their poems. So, in order to bring his argument, he gives at first the example of arithmetic, who should better understand arithmetic, a mathematician or a interpreter. Then he says that who should better understand the human body and anatomy, a doctor or an interpreter. So by this he step by step builds his argument that an interpreter or a rhapsode has nothing to say more or better than the particular person who are the experts of the same things. He says, just like Ion is an expert of the poetry of Homer, there are other persons who are best at other things. For example, Daedalus is a better an expert of architecture, Polygnotus is a better painter, and etc. etc. So Socrates says that just like Ion becomes stimulated and excited when he hears the name of Homer and he has a lot of things to say, in the similar manner, the other persons who are expert in different crafts like Daedalus or any other painter or carpenter or mathematician, they also become stimulated and excited when their particular field of expertise is mentioned. After making this argument clear, Socrates goes on to say that it is the divine power and not skill by the power of which Ion can speak exceptionally well about Homer. So it is not a skill that compels Ion to say better about Homer, because when he hears the name of Homer, he automatically gets excited and talks a lot of things about Homer in an exceptional way. But he cannot do the same in case of Hesiod or in case of any other poets. So Socrates' point is that just like painters or poets or sculptors have their own muses who inspire them to do exceptionally well in their field of expertise, Homer is also the muse of Ion, who inspires Ion with exceptional talent that he can speak exceptionally well about Homer. So this is how Homer becomes the muse of Ion. Then Socrates says that good poets are the interpreters of gods, because the things that they say in their works are originally comes from the voice of God. So the poets are actually gifted by God to utter the words of God in an exceptional way that it touches the soul of the reader. In a similar manner, the rhapsodes or the reciters of poetry, they also interpret the words of the poets who interpret the words of gods. So Socrates comes to the conclusion that the rhapsodes are actually the interpreters of the interpreters. How? Because the poets are the interpreters of gods and the rhapsodes are the interpreters of poets. So this is how the rhapsodes become the interpreters of interpreters. And the audience of these interpreters of these rhapsodes comes in the last position of getting the words of God. So gods are inspiring poets and poets interpret God. So in the similar manner, rhapsodes inspired by the poets, they interpret the poets, and the audience comes at the last as the audience comes to know about the words of gods from the rhapsodes who interpret the poets. Socrates further demonstrates the fact that it is divine dispensation that makes rhapsodes like Ion a formidable praiser of poets like Homer. And how does Socrates establish this point? By quoting lines from Homer's works and explaining how the skills of different professionals have been described in the poem in different lines. He quotes the lines where Homer talks about the chariot and asks Ion who should know better about a chariot, Ion himself or a charioteer. In this way, he further gives examples of other professionals like doctor or a fisherman or of a shear and of prophet. And in this manner, he establishes his point that Homer says different things about different professionals, and a rhapsode cannot know all of things. That is why, whenever a rhapsode, like Ion, who is also good at generalship, cannot be at the same time a good professional and brave general and a rhapsode. So, by clearing all these arguments, at last Socrates says to Ion that you are not a skilled interpreter of the poetry of Homer, rather a divine one, who is inspired by divination to say a lot of things about Homer in an extraordinary manner. That is why he says that you should consider yourself as divine and not as skilled. In this way, by logical argument, Socrates breaks the concept of Ion that he is the best and skilled interpreter of Homer, and proves the fact that rather he is inspired by divination and Homer is his muse.